Thank you for joining us today. I hope today's episode will help guide you forward. My goal for this podcast has always been to create a safe place for people who are navigating their grief journey to lean on one another and share their own experiences. I ask that you share, subscribe, like, and comment so we know how to best support you. Finally, we rely on listeners like you to help keep this journey going. Guide Through Grief is dependent on the support and contributions from you. Please consider supporting the show and our cause. Visit our social media pages or click the link in our description for more information. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm your host, your guide, Tom Van Ness, and we're getting close to wrapping up season 2. Hard to think it's come across so quick. So many great guests to help share their stories and their perspectives and their journey. And so lucky and blessed to have their courage to come in and be vulnerable, and a chance for all of us to be empathetic and trying to understand the situation that they come from. As I said before, grief is much like our DNA. It's really individual. It's very unique upon our own experiences, our own backgrounds, our own upbringing, the culture, the region. Everything plays a role of how we grieve. And today is another perspective of grief and perspective of something a lot of us will most likely go through in some part of our life. And that's going through a cancer battle. And so today's conversation is going to be with a caregiver whose loved one went through a cancer battle. But before we get into that conversation and that part of the journey, I want my guest to introduce themselves and say hello, and then we're going to get to our little game for every episode. So first, guest, say hello, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Keith Hardeman. I live in Columbia, Missouri, and I know you because you were a student in my various classes at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. And I want to say that it is every college professor's delight to see their students go and pass them, and you've passed me in terms of your successes in life, and I love seeing that. So let me enjoy that you have really done something incredible here with regard to what you're doing to pay it forward to help people who've gone through things that you've unfortunately had to go through. I have been married to my wife for 35 years now. At 27 years, she was diagnosed with invasive lobular carcinoma, which is a somewhat rare form of breast cancer. And she had a 14-month battle through primary treatment. And one of the things I will hope to talk about today is how the end of primary treatment with a good outcome, such as being in remission, doesn't necessarily mean that things are still going well, because there are other pathways to go through after that. And hopefully we'll be able to get into that.
No, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to our conversations today. I think our conversation could go a lot of different ways, and will, I think what will end up being the episode before ours, there will be probably a bunch of sidecar conversations that come up in this, and who better to have that? You beat me to the punch, because I was going to talk about one of the abilities for me to sit here in this space with people is the education I received in college and the gift of communication. And one of the biggest lessons I learned in communications is actually, I'm trying to remember the way you said it. There's a reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and it was like to make sure we could listen more than we talked.
Yes.
And I think to be in this space to listen to another is the real gift of this. And for the people in this space, and for our listeners and our viewers, we all put ourselves in a space to hear another and to hear the perspective and the journey of others. And if If you think I have passed you, so be it. I won't get in the argument. Today's not the space for that. Um, but it's because of you sitting here today, your education gets to get shared because we get to sit and listen to your story
Thank you.
and how that will help us in ours. So, um, before we get into really the big conversation, we're going to have the fun part, uh, and not even like the rest of the meetings scripted, because it's not. But we know what we're going to talk about. We have an idea of the world and the universe we're going to speak of. But I've brought this card game into the show. We're not playing essentially the game how it's intended to be played, but the goal is to draw a card and answer it from your heart, with just giving yourself a minute or so to think about the answer. And it's to help open our mind, open our heart, a chance to be vulnerable, in whatever way you feel comfortable. You can answer it lightheartedly, or you can answer it wholeheartedly. It is really up to you. There are some that are more softball questions. There are some that are a little bit more, being baseball fans, it might be a little bit more of a chin music, but it's still in the strike zone, so we can still answer it.
Well, I'll tell you what. How about I shake things up a little bit, because I like to do that in class. I don't have my readers with me, so
Okay.
I couldn't read it anyway.
All right.
So why don't you
draw the card and I'll read it for
why
you.
don't you look through there and pick the hardest one you'd like for me to answer?
Oh, no. I'll draw the random one and then I'll let you answer it. And then maybe we'll get a wild card and we'll both have to answer it, but we'll go with this one right here. What title would you give this chapter in your life?
Oh, boy. This chapter in my life, because I'm now 4 years into retirement, and I am going through a lot still with my wife, who's a little younger than I am, and so she still has to work to keep her health insurance. We don't need the financial help of her work, although it's nice for her to bring home a paycheck too. But we just couldn't afford her insurance, especially if we have a recurrence of cancer. So I don't know, something cheesy like a new beginning, because the first thing I did after I retired was write another book based on the cancer experience, and so I'm sort of trying to help Shelly as much as I can. She's the one who's bringing home the bacon, and I try to be the one to fry it up in pan. And I always told her that as long as she's working and I'm not, then she will not come home to a sink full of dirty dishes ever. She will not come home to dirty toilets. And when she comes home, which is usually somewhere between 5 and 6 p.m., dinner's either going to be ready to go, it's going to be on the stove cooking, it's going to be in the planning stage, or I am on my phone looking at an app to have something delivered. And I haven't been perfect with that, but I think I've been successful with all three of those things, maybe about 85% of the time.
Good. Well, that's thank you for sharing that part. That leaves it to my turn now. As I draw one, we were joking before my computers froze up with some of my notes today, and it was in your business communications class where we learned about Murphy's Law, where everything that kind of can go wrong will or present the opportunity. And I was feeling really good today. I normally always have some kind of technology trouble in every episode. My folks that help me produce and edit and distribute this, it's a fun conversation every week of what did I mess up this time. But my computer has frozen, so I have like the bottom third of my notes. So I tried to reset it. It's not even going to reset. I don't know Apple products that well, at least on the MacBook Air. So we're going to roll with it. We're going to draw my card, and then we're going to rock and do this thing today. I'm looking forward to it. And my streak of the hard questions continues. Are you lying to yourself about anything?
Oh, God.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one part could say, like, I'm lying to myself thinking that I'm okay. and I know I'm not okay, but I think that's something that I'm actively working on. So I don't know if I'm necessarily lying to myself about it anymore. But I think something I continue to battle, and I don't know how much I battled it beforehand, but I'm aware of it now, is I think I battled forgiveness or grace, especially to myself. Like I told myself I would always like, Tom, you're being too hard on yourself. You're going through a lot right now. It's okay. And then I would like walk away like feeling okay. And then 5 seconds later, I'd be right back on my own self again. Or um, I, yeah, I think that's probably where it is. I lied to myself about, yeah, I give myself enough grace here. It's okay, Tom. But then I turn right around and hold myself at a really high expectation and accountability to get through those moments. So I think that's where I probably struggle and get through the most. So um, that's another rendition of we're not really strangers. We definitely know each other. We talked a little bit about it, and so let's get into a little bit of the episode. And before we jump in, we talked a little bit about it. You were a professor at Westminster College at my time there, and before and after, and I you had such like a thing about you in college. You were one of the professors that everyone had to go through, like for speech 101. And I waited till like the first summer session I could do to take, yeah, to take class with you. And I remember one of our great stories, or at least one of my first experiences with you. You come in first day of class, and we talk about, hey, who here is, I think, a Lakers fan, and you have like a winter coat on and it's the summer. And I'm not even thinking at this point. I'm just some kid that likes to talk too much. And I was like, I'm a Bulls fan. I hate the Lakers, thinking Michael Jordan and the first championship. And as I'm saying that, you are unzipping your coat and you have a Lakers jersey on. And I don't even know how to backpedal at that point. I think I'm thinking, Tom, remove the foot out of your mouth. So that was the very first class I remember. And then really when I returned back to college for my fifth year, after taking a little time off and getting some things straight, finally declared my major and finaled it in business communications and had a couple classes with you that final year. And I think that last year was my best academic year. I believe I made the dean's list for the first time. Um, it's where I finally probably had my head on most straight, but I also really appreciated the classes I got from you. And where I really learned everything from non-personal communications to the professional way we communicate, all of the different little nuances and even the listening. So that's where we got to meet. And then from time to time throughout the years through Facebook and other comments, you were one of my few professors that, kind of followed along life. But um, what's been your experience? You talked a little bit about it. What other experiences of like seeing students um, as you've gone through the journey you have? What has it meant having past students kind of being back there to cheer along or support you and be along part of this journey for you? I mean, at one level, I think one played a role in one of your books, even. Um, but talk about the role of your students and myself, I guess, even through part of this journey and through your life so far.
Well, I love keeping up with my students, and actually wasn't on any social media, exception of Caring Bridge, which is sort of a health crisis portal that I used when Shelly was going through her cancer fight. But I didn't get on Facebook until May of 21, and I only got on because my publisher said that I needed to have more exposure to sell more books. It hasn't worked, by the way, but it was really incredible when I first got on. There was just this wave of former students I'd had from Westminster from the 90s who sort of came in, and I arrived at Westminster College in 1990, and I had some freshmen coming in 1990. So for those first 4 years, we were all freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And then to see them come back on Facebook and to see what they've been doing, these, some 30 years or so, and the success stories that they have are just unbelievable. And the fact that they wanted to connect with me was just amazing, because they become these incredible adults, these incredible professionals, these incredible marriage partners and parents. I love when they keep up with me and so forth. And I will tell you that the first time I had the child of a student, I was really feeling pretty old at that time. And fortunately, I didn't stay long enough to have a grandchild, but it was getting close to the point where that could have happened. It's just really amazing to see these people and to see the kind of people that they have evolved to be since their freshman years.
So let's talk. I want to also give our viewers and listeners a little bit of background of, I think, why your opinion of communications matters and why you have a good space to speak, because of your background and your experiences and where you've taught, not necessarily the schools of that prestigious level, but I think of being at that level of education and the impact and sending those people out into life, But talk a little bit about your teaching, your writing, your publishing, your authorships or books. There's so many ways to put it. You've had articles published and columns published and books published. So talk about your list of accomplishments and communications to our listeners.
I didn't get into education to be some sort of guru or to be some sort of person who thinks that my opinion is the only one that matters. I was probably a lot like you when I was in college. I was lost at the start. And then I took my first communication class and I thought, holy crap, this is really heavy stuff, because it was an interpersonal communication class. And I realized that it can be applied to literally any scenario in life. And it was so eclectic. And then to find out that we could deal with communication on an interpersonal one-on-one level, deal with communication on a public level, public speaking, deal with communication in an organizational manner, deal with communication in a business manner, and all the things that come back to the basic interpersonal class of speaking, listening, choosing the best words that most appropriately describe your thoughts, and interpreting them to the closest that you were thinking that the speaker is trying to communicate them. They work in every single scenario. And so you have to analyze your audience, who they are. You have to choose words that you think would be most appropriate to match what it is you're trying to communicate. And whether that's in speaking or in writing, it takes a lot of the same processes. I did a lot of academic writing because that was part of my job. I was supposed to do that as a college professor. I was supposed to present at conferences, and I'm supposed to publish things in professional education journal to have peer-reviewed types of outcomes. It was later on in my career that obviously that when Shelly was diagnosed and I realized that there was a forum for people who had gone through or who were just starting to go through the cancer experience, where they might benefit by hearing from someone who's gone through it. because I didn't know these resources were available at the start of Shelly's diagnosis, and I really felt lost. And so about halfway through, I was sitting in the waiting room while she was getting a radiation treatment, and I happened to look over on the magazine rack, and there was a magazine called Coping with Cancer magazine. I picked it up and I started reading it, and I read it from cover to cover. It was an article, there were articles written by medical professionals, but there were also articles written by survivors, by current cancer fighters or patients, and by caregivers. And I got something out of every single article. And I realized I wish I would have known about this.
Yeah.
7 months earlier, it would have been very beneficial for me to do this. So when I wrote the Shadow of Trepidation, which is a book about caregiving, it's part memoir, it's part how-to, and as one reviewer said, it's all love story. I thought this is something that I can share with somebody. I wrote it essentially for myself because I wanted to write something I know I would have benefited from, and so I want other people to benefit from my experience too. But then to realize my experiences may parallel yours, or it may be different from yours. But that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I got to the books. Is I just wanted to help people deal with a very, very stressful situation.
Yeah. But it's yeah, there were times in that book where I had to put it down. It just felt like a lot, not just because it felt similar at times, but I think the description of a love story, I think, is really appropriate. The chapter of cancer versus Christmas magic, I think, is a beautiful love story about the battle that we go through. And I think whether it's Christmas magic or there's, I think inevitably when we're going through grief or through a cancer battle, through something traumatic with our loved one, um, there's that Hollywood moment, that moment where you find the hope in like the dark spot where you see the light somewhere deep in the cave that's going to help maybe lead you out, however you want to describe that. Um, and I never thought of the book being kind of like described as a love story. But as you kind of said that, I was like, I way get that, especially with that chapter, and that description of how just that chapter in whole is, I found myself in putting myself in some of the other stories where that just someone showed up, something happened where, it put a little extra kick in your step. And part of me doesn't want to be a spoiler alert on anything that happened in it for those
Uh,
that might go out and buy it and read it now. But
well, I was wondering if you wanted me to quickly describe it.
yeah, talk about it a little bit. Yeah. If
Um,
you're going to buy the book, fast forward a couple minutes.
no, don't. Maybe this is the teaser to buy the book.
Yeah.
Uh, Shelly was diagnosed in the beginning of December of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of our kids had moved on. My daughter was 24 at the time, and she had moved to Kansas City as a professional. My son was a 21-year-old senior at Westminster College, so he was living in Fulton, which is obviously a lot closer than Kansas City to Columbia. And Shelly and I knew they were coming home for Christmas. Of course, we're in the middle of, and maybe we'll get into this more later on as we speak, into the treatment thing. And she had just finished her first chemotherapy, and that was terrible. There are no words to adequately describe how horrible chemotherapy is. So if people are saying, yes, I know it's bad, but no, you don't know it's bad until you A, experienced it, or B, sat in a front row seat to watch it. prior to that chemo, we had gotten our tree up. We had done a lot of Christmas shopping, but not all of it. The chemo that she had on December 21st was, it knocked her out. She was out of commission for about 3 days, where she couldn't move from the couch and needed help to go to the bathroom. She couldn't walk there herself. I had to have her arm around my shoulder and walk her over. So there I am, caregiving, and we've not fully prepared for Christmas. We've partially prepared for Christmas.
Yeah.
And my kids both came home on the 22nd. I erroneously put in there that Karen came the 23rd, and she said, "Dad, it was the 22nd." I said, "Yeah, and I stand corrected, but it's forever in the book that she came home on the 23rd. And it was good to have them there. They could watch Shelly if I needed to go out and get something. And at the time, I was having something specially made for her for Christmas. It was a gold and diamond pendant, and I had inscribed on there, "With you every step of the way." I wanted to go get that, and I did. They had it finished in time. Karen was able to go grocery shopping. I gave her my credit card and said, "Here's the list. Please, grab these things, whatever we can do." And by Christmas Eve, and we always had our special Christmas traditions, and many families do, or holiday, whatever holiday they celebrate, their special traditions, and we just couldn't carry them out this year. Usually we go out and we take a drive to look at Christmas lights, and Shelly just didn't have the strength to make it to the car. So we had a very simple Christmas dinner and lit a fire in the fireplace and played Christmas music on the Bluetooth, and that was about as good as we got. And about 9:30, Shelly said, "I can't stay up anymore." And I was with her because I hadn't been sleeping much myself during that time. So I said to the kids, "Sorry, you guys do what you need to do, and we're just going to bed." Well, I wasn't sleeping much at the time anyway. I did manage to fall asleep, but at about 3:15, I was wide awake, and I figured I'd better go out to the couch or something. I didn't want to move around, although Shelly was just out, like she was in this coma-like sleep when she was on chemo. And I thought I would plug the Christmas tree lights in just for a little bit of ambiance. Maybe it'll help me relax and fall asleep. Plug them in, and I find out that the place looks a lot different. We had put
Yeah, you described it when you went to bed. There was like the presents were still in the
shopping bags.
shopping bag is then the mail that it came in kind of image,
The stockings lay flat. We didn't make it over to the candy factory because that's what we always did. And plugged in the Christmas lights, and all of a sudden, there are presents under the tree that are wrapped. And the stockings were stuffed to capacity.
Yeah.
And, my first thought was, holy crap, did St. Nick make a trip here? And then realized that probably wasn't happening. And then I realized my kids, Nick and Karen, they were assuming the roles of St. Nick and St. Karen.
Yeah, it was Nick. It was just a different St. Nick. Yeah.
And they did quite the job. And that was the Christmas magic that made us realize, okay, we are all in this together. Shelly's the only one going through chemotherapy, but we are all in this together, and we're going to do everything we can for everybody. We were there for each other.
Yeah.
And that's how we did a little cheers on Christmas night, not with champagne, I'm afraid, because Shelly just couldn't handle any alcohol, and we had sparkling cider, and we cheered to Christmas. We cheered to each other. We cheered to St. Nick and St. Karen, and we cheered to a hopeful recovery and remission from cancer, and we cheered most to Christmas Magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I remember right, we're about a week away from the anniversary of Shelly finishing her chemo. I think it was like February 17th, if I remember kind of looking over at dates in the book, and not, but I mean, I kind of remember it was right around this time. I feel like I saw in this, it was somewhere in like mid-February.
Shelly's specific primary treatment involves 16 rounds of chemotherapy,
Yeah.
surgery, which has turned out to be 3 or 4 surgeries by this point. I mean, by today.
Mm-hmm.
30 rounds of radiation. And then what we didn't know was coming, because the chemo didn't get everything, another 6 months of oral chemo.
Yeah.
So what was supposed to end in late summer 2018 under the best of circumstances, which didn't take place, spoiler alert, she had a couple of surgeries that determined that there was cancer still in her body, and it spread to more lymph nodes.
Yeah.
So we had to be on that horrible chemo pill, which didn't pack as much of a punch as the real chemo, but it was horrible nonetheless. And her last pill was on the evening of February 17th of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And I took pictures, and I can still send them to you if you want to use them, of her holding that last pill up, of her swallowing it, and then holding the cup up in victory that this is done. So that is a big anniversary. The thing to remember is that cancer has this propensity to return.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the be-all, end-all, it's all over. There's what's called adjuvant or follow-up treatment, designed specifically to try to reduce the chances of recurrence. And that in itself it's actually technically still going on.
Mm-hmm.
But she had to take this terrible Verzenio pill for 2 years, and it just messed up her insides so much. And now she has permanent neuropathy, and she has permanent lymphedema, and she has to go in for physical therapy at least once a month for lymphedema, and she will for the rest of her life.
Mm.
So the cancer never really ends. As one of my friends who went through cancer said, that her oncologist said, the cancer experience is over when you die of something else first.
So, I mean, let's go back before we jump in and start getting in, because we've touched on a little bit of it from the start. Let's go back and talk more about your journey from the start, which is also Shelly's journey. And you talk about it a couple different times in the book. This is Shelly went through all of this, but then there's really, her family, you and the kids that are right there along her side, and that go through that journey with her, but then also have kind of your own. So I don't know how you want to talk about this experience and this journey, from your perspective, also hers, or maybe it's how you went through in the writing process, but take us through your journey and your story, and the parts of it that others can maybe hear and take something away from, in knowing that, not for hope or false hope, but just for a next step, another step, another light they can use to shine and find their way.
Well, by saying, I'm glad that you are doing this on grief, and I think we all know that there's not a competition in grief in terms of who experiences the most grief. There's not a competition in the cancer community in terms of who has had the worst treatment. It's just that we all share something we can empathize with, and it becomes kind of a community. We joined the cancer community I remember this process very vividly. On Monday, December 4th, 2017, I got home from work. Shelly beat me home. And so we are cooking dinner together. We both had long days. I'm just finding out that her day was a little longer than I knew about. We're cooking dinner, and Shelly says to me out of the blue, well, I guess I should share this with you. And conversations that begin that way are never good.
Mhm.
She said, last week I felt something. I felt a lump, and I went to get it checked out last week. And the doctor said that he thought it would be a good idea if we biopsied it to as a cautionary thing to do. He said it's probably going to be fine, but today I had the biopsy, and they will call me at work on Wednesday morning on the 6th. So the first thing I thought was, my God, I'm just hearing this now. But then again, she said, Keith, you're a worrier. And I am a worrier. I'm good at it. I spend a lot of time worrying, and she probably spared me that worry, because I would have worried the moment she was going in to get the lump checked. Well, we both went into work on the morning of the 6th, and I had afternoon classes, but I went in early to do some grading. And at 8:42, my cell phone rings. It's Shelly on the caller ID. And whenever I answer the phone when it's Shelly, I say hello, and she always says, hello, my darling. That didn't happen this time.
Oh.
There was an audible sigh, and I knew right then, this is not good. And then she, after a couple of seconds, managed to push out the words in a half vocal, half whispered tone. It isn't good news. I have breast cancer. And of course, we both just sort of lost it on the phone right there. She was calling me from work because that was where she had received the call. And she told me, I can't work today. She said, I'm going home. Can you please come home too? And I said, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I spent a few minutes typing up real quick emails to my classes, canceling classes. And this was, I think probably students always thought, oh, hey, great, no class today. But this was at the end of the semester when we were going over things that were going to be covered on a final exam. But I said, I'm sorry, we have a family emergency, and I can't come in today. I'll give you more information when it's appropriate. So I drove home, and as you know, the geography of mid-Missouri, the drive from Westminster and Fulton to my house is probably about 30 or 40 minutes. And I have to tell you, when you've just learned that your wife has cancer, spending energy and focus on being a safe driver was a very difficult thing to do. And I veered off the road, and I didn't veer off, but veered to the right because I was imagining the most horrible things. And of course, I couldn't begin to imagine the most horrible things. I got to live them watching Shelly. Got home, ran up the stairs. She was standing by the couch. We locked eyes, and then we fell into each other's arms and fell apart completely. Mm. So after we had composed ourselves and we talked a little bit, and of course at that point we just didn't know what the answers to various questions were yet, we had come to the point that we realized now we have to tell the kids. And I know that you have gone through this, Tom, having to tell your kids and having to be the one to tell your family the news. And you've experienced those phone conversations, assuming you had some of them on the phone. And those conversations didn't go well with our kids. They reacted as their kids would normally react if one of their parents has a life-threatening illness. And then we had to call Shelly's parents and sister in Iowa and my brother in Southern California. And again, you can predict how those conversations went. Well, What stage is it? What's the treatment going to be? What's this? What's this? What's this? And that led us to find out the kind of the third stage of going through learning that you're in the cancer community, and that is the next 5, 7, 8 days were a daily barrage of tests.
Mm-hmm.
We had blood tests, we had scans, we had to do a PET scan, we had to do an MRI, we had to have individual consultations with various members of our oncology team, meeting them and getting to know them and finding out what they did and what it is that they would be doing. And so we didn't find out for 9 days later, December 15th, that what was thought to be about a 2-centimeter tumor was a 7-centimeter in diameter tumor, so 3 times the size. What was thought to be having maybe 2 lymph nodes and perhaps as a result a stage 2 cancer diagnosis was actually at least 5 lymph nodes, and as spoiler alert, we found out a number of months later it was actually closer to 8 or 9 that had been infected. And then we learned our treatment regimen, which I've already said, the chemo, surgery, the radiation. And that was a lot to handle. And that first 7 days after diagnosis, 5 days after diagnosis, I lost 7 pounds in the unhealthiest way possible. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. It was just a terrible, terrible thing because all I could envision was, this is going to be my last Christmas with my wife. And so once treatment started, then that's when the metaphorical fit hit the shin, and then you found out this is what it's really like. So that's how we got in, and the grief and the terror that we were both experiencing was just, it came in waves. I think I referred to it as a tsunami in the book. We were just getting hit with all this terror and all this grief. The grief, obviously, because we were fearful of what the terrible outcome could be, but the terror was that even in the best case scenario, it was going to be terrible in terms of the treatment, in terms of what that did to her body.
Yeah, so pause there. A question that came up in my head was, that first week after you found out and you're going through having these phone calls with kids, Shelly's family and your family members, and then it starts to probably become a couple close friends, that are getting some of these conversations. Um, what I I don't know if I remember experiencing that in like the first couple days of Leslie's battle when she was admitted for the pneumonia, and the first day she was still conscious and then she was in a coma. So I remember like that second day, that first and second day, there was a lot of phone calls and a lot of text messages, and then it just turned into Caring Bridge, because like it got to be too much. So, I mean, I guess in that first 7 days to where you decided to go to Caring Bridge, like I can imagine people felt maybe rubbed the wrong way you didn't call them soon enough, and maybe they expressed that to you, or there were people that were just wish they would have known sooner, could be able to help. There was probably guilt you guys had on, should we call them? Shouldn't we call them? Should we just wait till tomorrow? Like, what were some of those emotions like that week? I'm like trying to process, oh, here's another phone call. Here's the layers of the stories you would share, probably because of who it is. There's probably some things you're not sharing, some things you are, some things you forget, because it's the 12th time you've shared it. What's can you talk a little bit more about, like, I just feel like that's a thing that so many people go through, so many different variations and experiences of how do I share, when's the right time to share, how do I come up with the list of people I call in order so I don't upset a family member for not calling them soon enough? I don't know. What's that?
We decided before we called anybody, we would have way too many calls to make.
Mm-hmm.
A. B. I wasn't on social media at the time. And Shelly had always said, I am not using social media to give the intimate details of my life. So we decided right off the bat, we're going to call our kids first because they are our kids and they are the closest to us. And then we would call her parents and sister and my brother, not in any particular order. We both had phones.
Right.
And that was all. Those were all the calls we were going to make. I realized people, when I slipped out on the morning of December 6th out of the office, went out the back because I didn't want to run into somebody who didn't know what was going on in my life and saying, hey, Keith, how's your day going so far? And that probably would have been a bad scene. I slipped out the back. But I also, in addition to canceling classes, I had to cancel my presence at meetings. So I knew that a few people knew
There's going to be questions.
Something
that came
was
out.
up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So late afternoon, I sent an email to the specific people who I felt closest to at Westminster. And I told them, here's the situation. We just got a breast cancer diagnosis. We have another week or 10 days of testing, so we can't answer any questions, A, and B, we are very emotionally unstable at the moment, and we don't want to talk to you. So I'm asking you, please, do not call us, do not text us, do not email us. We're in the middle of processing. What I told you that she has a breast cancer diagnosis is all we know. Shelly didn't say anything other than to her two best friends at work. And so I'm going to go out of order a little bit. One of my friends who had gone through breast cancer told me about Caring Bridge, and so I got on. I thought, oh, this is wonderful. It allows us to keep everybody up to date in a timely fashion. It allows us to keep them at an arm's distance when we need privacy for grieving. But the one thing that Shelly and I were very careful about on that day, I can't say for the rest of the time, but on that day is we're not reaching out other than the immediate family members. We're not reaching out to anybody until we're ready to reach out to them. And so anybody who may have thought, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why, I could have helped you. And that never happened, by the way, for us. We were fortunate in that respect. But I could have asked, what would you have done to help us? We didn't know what we needed for help. We were just sitting there in shock. Yeah. Nobody did that. And, our friends, it was really tough on them too. The diagnosis was really difficult for them too. Obviously not as close as to the situation as I was, but especially those friends, we had a few who had gone through this. And one person in particular, I remember, sent me an individual email and said, Keith, I remember going through this and how everybody was focusing on me, but my husband, it was, except for the physical part, it was every bit as hard on him as it was on me. And so I want you to know we have you in our caregiving sites too. We want to take care of you too, because you're no damn good to Shelly if you don't take care of yourself. That was something I didn't pay attention to enough at that time, which, later maybe we'll get into my own physical problem that occurred because I wasn't handling the situation well. But that's what we did, is that we put ourselves first with that. And when we're ready to give the information, then we'll do it. Shelly waited until, I don't know, probably, I think it was the day after I got onto Caring Bridge, and made one single Facebook post on it and said, I feel the need to make this one public announcement on Facebook. I know that I'm going to be looking different very soon, and you should know this is that I had a breast cancer diagnosis, and I'll be starting chemotherapy very soon. Keith and I will be communicating with you on Caring Bridge. Here is the link. And that's kind of it for now. So that's what we did.
Yeah. And I think people should understand. And I think you said it so wonderfully. I think whatever people feel what they need in that moment, they should feel okay asking for that.
Yes.
You know, like if it's privacy they should be able to ask for that, you know, send a note out to your closest friends just saying, I remember that doing that with 3 of the families here.
Yeah.
You know, when it happened, I'm like, hey, here's what happened. I need to keep this a little insulated till I can get home and circle my wagons with the boys. I trust you guys to be that person. I just can't explain much more right now. But I think we all go through those variations of who we feel comfortable speaking to, and me being a people pleaser, will then feel worried about asking for something that I want, instead of always thinking, well, what do I think they need? And what do they need to hear from me? What do they want to hear from me so they can feel better? I have to start to shift on what do we need in our house. And
Yes.
it becomes more of a self approach. I don't want to say a selfish approach, because it's not selfish, but it's I wanted you to say those things, because I think whatever battle people are going through, there are great ways to just ask for space. And social media allows us to ask for that space,
Yes.
or give us better channels to express what we have. And you should never feel guilty for asking what you need for in that case. So,
Well, in your case especially, your kids needed you,
oh, for sure.
and you needed them too. But that I can't imagine anyone would think you're doing it the wrong way by focusing most on your kids and coming together as a team to grieve together and to offer support for one another. And that's, my kids were adults. They were 24 and 21 at the time, but they were grieving. And you know, when we all were able to get together, we're all a member of the club,
Yeah.
or the prison.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be there.
Yeah, like I've always liked clubs. Like, this isn't a club.
No.
Like, people say this is the club you never want to. Well, no shit.
It's a prison.
Yeah,
You're stuck in it. There's
Yeah.
not a damn thing you can do about
It's
it.
like in those European roundabouts you can't get out of. You just like keep circling. You're on the inside circle, and there's no hope for you getting out of it. Is I think a better description than a club. And I don't want to get ahead of your story, but I think, yeah, along with the things people say, we'll get into that a little bit, you know, and get into that. But let's pick up and not get too sidetracked as far as your story and your journey. So you guys have found out, you've communicated out to some people, and now a Facebook post of, here's what's going on, here's our journey. And we've talked a little bit about the first chemotherapy being just before Christmas and getting through Christmas time. And that would have been in 2017.
Correct.
Okay. So pick up from there. What part of your story and journey do you want to pick up and carry on with, you know, getting out of the holidays?
Well, you had brought up the idea of things that people say that were well-intentioned, but probably didn't quite come off the right way. And I want to tell you that I tried to head that off at the pass.
It doesn't work.
It was, I would say it was successful. A few people just didn't seem to get it, but I said I said a number of things in my very first post. And by the way, Caring Bridge is still, it's open. You can, Google Shelly Hardeman Caring Bridge, or go to Caring Bridge and just put Shelly Hardeman in there, and you can see they're all still there. That first one, because I knew one of my cancer caregiver colleague / friend said, Keith, you need to know this. People are going to say things, and they're going to really mean well, and it's going to sound like they don't. And so you need to know it's coming. And I said, well, things like what? And he said, well, they're going to try to turn it into a philosophy 101 class. And say, well, I believe everything happens for a reason. Maybe there is some sort of scientific reason, but I can't imagine that, any divine person was sitting around, waking up one morning and saying, you know what? I think Keith and Shelly Hardeman need a lesson on marriage. So I think today I'll give her cancer and hope they figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Or we're going to teach a bunch of married couples how a couple should rally around each other. We're going to make this couple go through the ringer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, so I said in my first post, things not to say. Please don't tell us you think everything happens for a reason. If you want to think that, that's fine. We don't. We're not framing it that way. Please don't tell us that, the various things that people would say, that won't help. What will help is knowing that you're there, knowing that you're going to be supportive of us when we need you. But Shelly and I also had a discussion. We had to recognize that we very well might be the first cancer couple some of our friends have ever known. Mm. So what we have to do is offer them the gift of grace. We need to hear, perceive that they're saying, we love you, we care about you, we hurt for you so much, and we want to help you in any way we can if you'll let us. That's what we need to hear when they say things like, you've got this, don't worry, everything's going to be okay, just stay positive, everything happens for a reason. We can't hear those words. Hear what they actually mean. And I think about 9 out of 10 times we were both successful. Sometimes people cross the line, but about 9 out of 10 times we got what they were trying to say.
Yeah,
we did, and that was helpful, I think, for everybody, because in the end, the last thing you want. I came across this in an article. We don't want people to commit cancer ghosting. And that is that, oh, my friend's got cancer. I don't know what to say, so I'll just stay away from them. Well, yeah, we've got cancer. Do we have to lose our friends too? We don't want that either. So I would say that for the people who say the wrong thing, it's not the end of the world that you did.
Yeah.
It would be better if you learned from it and didn't repeat the mistake. But in the end, the most important thing is that you're there for us. We know that you're a phone call away. We know if we asked you to grab something for us at the grocery store or at the pharmacy, you would do it in a heartbeat. We know that, and the actions do speak a whole lot louder than the words. But no words at all, no action, just staying away. Even people who gave us likes on my Caring Bridge post, that was an act of support. And it was helpful in some capacity.
Yeah, I think the chapter in the book was called "When Well-Meaning People Say It All Wrong." I think for me, it was the chapter I probably enjoyed the most. Not only because it was most relatable, I
Yeah.
think, to my experience, but I think also with your background and our experiences together in communication, like, it's just like it just was really relatable, and it's also a place I found myself giving a lot of grace, I think, to, like, what you said, and I never thought it in the way that you highlighted it. It's I don't I I don't know if I knew a lot of widows under, like, the age of, like, 60 something, I knew a couple before this happened to me, um, so I couldn't even really think. I was like, "What did I say that one?" Like, I and this was, I think, almost as much of an experience, or I guess the grace I gave to others in those scenarios, I tried to also give myself, because it was as much as of an experience for me as it was for them, and to try to, much like you taught in class, of just being able to listen, trying to hear what they were trying to say, what they were intending to say, not
Right.
actually what came out of their mouth. Like, and I think you said, like, 9 out of 10 times, the intent is good. There's, like you said in another chapter, there's always someone playing the asshole card. In your case scenario was the insurance companies and the hospitals. I think in mine, there was always someone that wanted to provide an opinion or advice when they may not necessarily have. I think in those that lost their spouse or maybe a child, the saying kind of goes, until you sit in the front row of the funeral. It's hard to know what that is. And you said another way, until you sit there, like, in the treatment chair, by your loved one, it's hard to know that experience. And I you said it so many great ways. Let me just go back to look at my notes. My computer finally unfroze.
All
Um,
right.
um, Nick and Karen, being your kids and being older, were able to provide, like, such strong reminders, and, like, of your filter, and reminding you of those moments. Like, that. Come on. They're trying here. They're trying to be nice. They're trying to be there for you, and that's definitely something that, um, I think no matter what perspective we're coming from, whether we have someone that is there to help remind us of those moments. For me, I didn't necessarily have, my boys aren't old enough to provide that kind of insight. I might have been lucky enough to, like, talk to some other, like, fraternity brothers, a couple that were really close with me through all this, a couple friends, my mom, might be able to provide some perspective before I let out, or, lashed out of whatever it may be. But I mean, a lot of times it was after the fact, like, I kind of lost my shit, or, like, over explained whatever it may be. And I had to use that experience as the learning moment. Um, what I describe it a lot of times as, like, buyer's remorse. Like, we say something, we do something, and we later kind of, like, draw back on it. And it's that same feeling, like buyer's remorse. Is there anything, um, for people that are in the caregiving scenario, or maybe even going through the battle themselves, how important it to have someone you can trust to give you that feedback of, like, whether it's a child, a best friend, of, like, remember, this is coming from a good place, Keith, dad, buddy, coworker, old pal, whatever it may be. Like, how important is it to have someone like that? And who, for people that might feel like they don't have someone because it's their spouse going through it and they don't want to lean on them to be that person, like, how can they find that person? Where can they find comfort? How do they know they have that person?
Well, the idea behind all this is that I think I said 9 out of 10 times, that 1 out of 10 was usually when somebody didn't stay in their lane.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest problem. I think that when you can actively, if you can, and again, you brought up a great example of how difficult that was, and that you didn't know many people who were as young as you who were widowers or widows, because in the normal, quote unquote, scheme of life is that this happens much later in life. Um, my kids know, just like they'll get it from me too, that sometimes they will just say what needs to be said. And if, I didn't like it, tough shit. But, when they were both saying, look, you remember, because you're the one who said this in the first place, Dad, to give them grace. Give them grace. Because sometimes there was, and I'm not going to get into what it is, it's still up. Somebody made a comment on Caring Bridge that really set me off. I kept it inside my home. I even contacted a colleague because it was a religious comment, and it was from one of my religious studies colleagues that I contacted. I said, please help me perceive this in a way that sees the positive intent.
Get the red out of my eyes right now.
Yes.
If you can help me understand this.
The red out of my eyes, the fire off of my neck. And he read the comment and he said, oh, shit. No wonder you're pissed off.
Yeah.
And I remember I put about 3 different replies to it. The first one was pretty snotty. I left that up for about maybe 30 seconds before I deleted it. And I put another one up, and no, that's not good enough. And then finally, I just thought, this doesn't merit a response. I didn't respond to all the comments anyway. Some of them I did, but this one's just going to go without comment. I know where the person was coming from. I know it was coming from a good place, but it just wasn't. It was out of the person's lane.
Mm-hmm.
People tell us how we should be coping. When somebody gave me grief over, you need to be more positive, Keith. Someone who had never gone through a cancer incident in her family. On those occasions, with that particular person, I did tell her, look, I know this coming from a good place, but I hope you will never say that to another cancer family member again. And this is why. Because when you are saying when things are going bad, and this was a bad day for Shelly, and I ran into this person, and she said, how's she doing? And I said, well, I'm not sure. We've gone through 7 months of treatment, and we don't know yet. And she kept saying, but she's going to be okay, right? She's going to be okay. And I said, I'd love to be able to corroborate that, but I can't. I don't know. And she said, oddly, Keith, that's your problem. You and Shelly need to have a better attitude.
Oh, I remember that part in the book.
It's like, are you serious? Sort of slipping around here, sorry. When you say, and then she went so far as to say, my best friend had cancer, and the only reason she's alive today is because she had a good attitude. And I said to her, when you say that, essentially you're blaming Shelly and me for Shelly feeling crappy today because we're not thinking about her cancer the right way. And cancer, the last time I checked, is not a psychological illness.
Yeah. I was going to that part in the book because I remember writing notes down when it part.
And that was just getting way out of her lane. Now, immediately, she backed off immediately and teared up and said, oh my God, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, some people start going and it's like the brakes come on a little late.
Yeah.
But it creates a fender bender. I mean, if you run with the analogy, it's like they're running a little too close behind you on the car and you have to stop suddenly and they just rear end you. No one's really hurt, but there's damage to the car. There's some frustration with it. Can be repaired if we learn from it. Don't follow too closely. Be prepared to stop. But that's
That's a great analogy, and hopefully the way she responded, I think she got it,
Led you to believe that, yeah, they get it. And I
and
think
and
that's,
and I feel confident. I've not seen this person since that time, but I do feel confident that she has never said anything like that to anyone again.
yeah. Um, so that's good comments. I'm just zooming in so I don't have to squint as much. Because I don't want to leave this chapter yet without talking about some of these pieces. And I guess that leads right into saying something versus nothing. I I think that can be on a lot of levels and how that can be perceived or taken. I think for people that have not been in our shoes, have not sat with their loved one for chemo treatment, have not sat in the front row of the funeral, to understand that it's better to say something than nothing. I often describe that as like trying to show genuine curiosity. And what that's not is coming up and saying, "How are you doing? How's Shelly doing?" Like, do you want the real answer or do you want the answer that's going to allow you to walk away in 10 seconds feeling better about yourself? Because those are really impossible questions to answer and think about, how am I going to answer this today?
Did you ever, because I did you ever talk to them, respond on a meta level and ask them, I'm sorry, are you looking for, is that a cancer question or is that a greeting question? And I'll answer either way.
I started a couple times with people that I would say I knew them better. No, they didn't necessarily mean to come out that way. Like I could just, it was actually a moment to kind of like exhale and joke about like how much I hated it. I was like, oh, well, how much time do you have here? You know, I was like, do we want to sit down and have this over a cup of coffee? You know, but it was to those people that loved me so much. I felt safe making that joke, but that was such a hard piece. So when I talk about genuine curiosity, I saw, I think some examples that I've heard of people doing this is sitting down and saying, Keith, tell me what the feelings, the taxation on you's been this past week of going through this battle, you know, and knowing for me, it's someone when they show that genuine curiosity, they don't mind hearing the answer. That they don't know necessarily how to fix it because it's not something worth fixing, but they know that they want to try to be in that space for you and have a better understanding of where you're from. And so I think what I've described as like a genuine curiosity where they want to know more about what you're going through, about what your loved one is. Or I think even at times, like if it's not curiosity, I love it when people come up and share a story about Leslie.
Oh, oh.
Like I love hearing those stories. I want to hear those stories. I've I've been on one or two dates where the girls even ask like, "Well, tell me a great story about Leslie when you guys did something like this." And that's so safe to hear those questions because we know we're in a safe, like that person saying, "This is a safe place to say whatever you feel comfortable." I want to know that. So I mean, I'm assuming is that what are some of those genuine curiosity questions? Like my mom went through cancer. I did sit down with her. My brother and I spent some time up at Mayo with her, but I was having my own young family and doing of that scenario. So I don't, and my time with Leslie was so short lived. I just remember like taking notes on my phone and trying to remember the medical terms and how to update her parents and my mom and my dad about what was going on. So if a friend wants to try to be there for you, like what are some things that they can show some genuine curiosity that would help someone like you or Shelly feel, oh, here's a person that the intent's good and they want to be there. Like, what are some of those kinds of questions and approaches that people can feel safe to come to you with?
That's a really, really good question. And I don't know, we may, because I never really categorized it like that before. I hadn't thought about it like that before. And I thought that people were asking those questions to find out, is there something I can do right now that's going to lessen the burden a little bit? Can I take something off of your plate? Sort of, where are you now, as opposed to really giving us a chance to just unload. I think it's good if they can read the room a little too, because you probably remember, and even you experienced today, that there are better days for that to happen than others.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, there was this one time when we found out that the chemo didn't get all the cancer. This was a bad day. This was a bad day. And we just thought, is this the end? What other trick does the oncologist have up her sleeve? Which, by the way, she did. We just didn't want people to know, or we didn't want people to tell us, look, it's going to be okay. That was, again, that was the one that was getting the furthest outside of their lane. But to recognize that some days we have spoken to 12 different people about this, and we don't want there to be a 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Read the room. There are days we don't want to talk about the cancer. But there are days that we need to unload, that we can't stop talking about it, that
Just can't help it. Like, it's like somehow it just always
it just
comes back to that.
comes back.
Mhm.
And I guess if I would have thought about it in those terms, because again, I really didn't, but I would have asked, okay, look, how serious are you? Are you really going to be here to hear it?
Mhm.
I have a good friend, somebody you probably remember too, at Westminster, and she went through breast cancer, and she had a couple of family members who, as soon as she would get a little bit too real, they would say, ew, ew, I don't want to hear that.
Mhm.
And that's like the worst thing to do, because you don't want to hear about it, and yet I've experienced it. And again, that's fine. Then you know who not to trust, not even to start with. But we had our friends who had gone through the experience, and we definitely, if we felt a need to reach out to them, they were our safe people.
Mhm.
We would reach out, and we even say, are we? Is there a day that you guys can come by? Let's have a drink, and we just need to unload. And they would say, yeah, let's do this Friday, and so forth. So we would be able to do that. So for us, it was more pointed in terms of
No, go ahead and address that.
it was more pointed toward the people we really knew had already gone through this,
Mhm.
and then the feedback they could give us would be very solicited.
Yeah.
And that's much better feedback to get, even if you don't want to hear it, than the unsolicited feedback.
Yeah.
The don't do the chemo, it's only killing her immune system. The you
Well,
need,
before we, yeah, because I mean, that's um, there was some really good nuggets you went in, and that's also one of the nuggets I want to talk about in the book as well. I think the realness of people not being ready to hear you or to be in that space with you it's one of the things that caught me most by surprise. And I agree that it is based on the person, not on the relationship you have with that person. There's, I've talked about them on this show a bunch of different times. The Klauses, they're a family that lives a couple doors down. Our kids are the same age. There's never been one point in the last 3 years where they've made me feel ashamed or guilty of sharing my feelings. Like, and we all run. They're the people that got me to start running. We've gone on runs where we spent the entire runs of just like me unloading some stuff. And it's just, wow, I can't imagine what it's like for you to be going through that. And just them holding that space and making me feel safe when then there's other people, because I thought of who they were, who they are in my life, that they would be there regardless. And I'm not going to be putting names in who they are to like throw them out under the bus, because they weren't doing it on purpose.
But they were really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I've even had it replay since the podcast has come out in the 2 seasons, of like, I don't hear anything from him about any of the episodes. And then I've turned around and asked him, I was like, hey, have you man, the podcast has gone really well, or there was this episode that I thought was really interesting I don't know what you've listened to them yet, but this might be one to listen to. And I applaud them for coming out and saying things like, Tom, it's just too hard for me to listen to, but man, that's part of like where I need the Nick around or the Karen around, like, Tom, they're trying, that they're just not ready to listen to that. I'm like, what do you mean that shit's too hard to listen? I live this. How can it be too hard for you? And I think that's the frustration I carry in this. And I think the thing I, even going back to the card, lie to myself about, and it just carries a lot more weight on me than I think at times, but it's not a reflection of how those people feel about me, because I know they love me. They want to be there for me. They just don't necessarily know how. But I think that comes around to like, at least try to say something instead of just disappearing, ghosting, just like being a fly on the wall, call in and say, I'm going to bring over dinner, or, I saw this really funny movie that we rented. I'm going to send you the digital rental through Apple or whatever. Like, come up, just do something. Like, don't ask if they can do something. Like, just do it. We talked about a couple episodes with Bren of like, just do it. I think people will correct you if it came across wrong and if it rubbed them the wrong way. But it's better to try to do something than feeling like doing nothing is the safer play.
As you're talking about that, I'm kind of having this whirlwind in my head of about 4 or 5 different ways I can respond to this. And so let me tell you, and I've said this story publicly anyway, but I'll say it again here, that this was really a good example of what it is that people can do, even if they don't know if they can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine called me with a sense of urgency, said, one of my coworkers has just been diagnosed with cancer. I'm going over to her place right now. What do I say to her? I said, well, there are lots of things you can say to her, and I'm going to say probably none of them matter. You're going to say something that will make her not feel any better, which is the goal, because the alternative is you'll say something that'll make her feel worse. Any ideas that you thought about saying something to make her feel better, please dismiss them. You can't fix this. As much as you want to, you can't fix this. Well, then what do I say? And I said, say whatever. I would be a lot less worried about what words I was going to use and a lot more focused on giving her the space to use the words she wants to use to describe what she's going through. My friend was pretty intelligent. He picked up right away. He goes, "Oh, the listening approach."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you do it the right way, you won't say 50 words of the whole conversation. She knows you're coming over. She knows you're a friend. She probably knows you're safe to unload on. So he called me up later that night.
They're letting you in their house. You're a good person.
Yeah.
Like that's really 90% of what they want is just someone in their walls that they can trust.
The thing about ghosting,
Not just a dating term.
no, it's not a dating term. Cancer ghosting, again, I mean, you can put it in any other context, widow ghosting, whatever. The thing that it does, it makes us feel alone.
Yeah.
And you can say the worst things, the wrong things, but if you are there, that speaks far louder than the words that you use.
Better than leaving me there alone, pondering the
Yes.
what ifs and the coulda, woulda, shoulda scenarios.
And my friend said, you were exactly right. He said, I don't think I said 50 words. I said, so tell me what's going on. And she just unloaded and thanked me, not me, but my friend, thanked me at the end because she said, everybody's been telling me you need to stay positive. It's all going to be okay. It's this and this, it's this, it's this. And they wanted to talk instead of letting me talk. You let me talk. And this was so helpful.
Yeah. You started to go into, well, in that chapter, you kind of call it the highlights. You highlight some of the things people say and do where it might come across or the intents to come across okay. And there's one part where, and you were just starting to talk about it, where people start to then maybe give opinions on, well, you shouldn't do chemo because it's really hard on the body. Or I know you're at this one hospital, but I can maybe try to get you into this clinic. Or have you heard of this doctor? Or this fresh water from this glacier in Norway, provides some rare mineral that it's not proven to do anything, but man, it sure helps your attitude. Like they'll share so many things, just as I think I found a lot of ways people weren't sharing ideas on how to grieve or how to get through this. It became more instructional. I guess is maybe a safer word of like, I mean, there's some outlandish suggestions for us. I'm sure just as outlandish as you received, but tell me more. Tell me about the heartache, the hardship, the tricks to the communication from others that starts to become more opinionated or instructional in these more difficult moments.
Again, a great question. I want to start off by saying they mean well.
Mm-hmm.
They mean well. And I'll also say, prior to Shelly's diagnosis, I had a good friend who got cancer and ultimately passed away from it. But those first couple of months, I was sending him article after article after article, as if it somehow didn't occur to me that, gosh, maybe his oncologist already knows this shit. Why? And of course, see, the first one I got, my memory went back to that. I thought, Steve must have thought I was the biggest dumb shit on the planet.
You opened that chapter, I think, that way of like, oh my gosh, after going through this, if you go back and think about all the different ways I stuck my foot in my mouth,
yes,
like and I think that's a better point of why you better go say something and not nothing,
right.
Because it won't be long before you're in that scenario, and that's where you learn your grace, and that's where you learn, how difficult it is. But keep going.
again, it didn't bother me. I mean, well, it did bother me when people did it to Shelly, and her energy level was already compromised by her treatment. And especially when we went through this bad time where we found out that the regimen that we were put on wasn't going to finish the job, wasn't going to work unless we did something else. And so I referred to this chemo pill that we had to be on for 6 months, which again was horrible. We didn't want to hear anything from people at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And when this friend who, good person, supportive person, she was there, by the way, and I'm not throwing this person under the bus, but it was just the wrong thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go to this other clinic. And that, this was a phone conversation. I could hear the whole conversation because I was sitting next to her. And I started talking under my breath. Shut the fuck up. And you know, who the hell do you, and Shelly's looking at me and she's just sort of, stop it, Keith, stop it. And she was very nice and said, no, we're at the place where we need to be. And again, this is part of the education of all of it for people, for friends of cancer families to recognize that even in a successful treatment, it's 2 steps forward and a step back. What happened with Shelly was not an anomaly. The fact that it didn't finish the job, the chemo didn't finish the job. We knew more chemo was in the cards, and we were hoping that this would be the amount that would get the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then to have to go through and defend what we're doing to someone, again, I use the term who's way out of their lane, but to someone who doesn't understand this. I was blessed in that my brother is a physician. He's retired now, but he's a physician, not an oncologist. But nonetheless, he had colleagues who were oncologists.
Mm-hmm.
And Shelly's oncologist, who we love, I'll give her a big plug, Liana McCarrion at Missouri Cancer Associates. Love this woman, owe Shelly's life to this woman. I asked her, would you be able to fax everything that you do to my brother who is a physician? And she said, yes, absolutely. And so my brother would take this and give it to his friends in oncology in the hospital where he worked. And every single time, 10 out of 10 times, however many times it was, my brother said, my colleagues say what she's doing is exactly what they would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew we had the best.
Yeah.
We had the best of the best. What I didn't appreciate is when people maybe try this other clinic. That was coming from a better place than, you need to try Colonel Sanders' 11 secret herbs and spices and take these vitamin supplements and, drink water from this glacier in Europe. And you'll be cured.
Mm-hmm.
And Shelly was much nicer than I was. I let this person get about 5 sentences in before I said, because again, the person is there. They're not ghosting us. You don't have a medical degree.
Yeah.
You didn't go to have a pre-med major in college. You don't have a medical background.
They haven't been to every appointment with
You haven't been to every appointment with us. Exactly.
you. Yeah.
My God, the things that I know that I wish I didn't know. I mean, people will ask me cancer questions like I'm some sort of oncologist. And it's like, I'm not an oncologist. Yes, but Keith, you did go through this and you know the names of all of Shelly's, all of the drugs that she had. Yeah, I learned stuff I wish I hadn't learned, but I learned it. but you're not in that position. And I know it's coming from a good place, but you don't get a doctorate from YouTube watching videos with spooky music in the background talking about conspiracy theories that, oh, we have a cure to cancer and the doctors don't let it out because it makes them a whole lot more money by treating you. That's a crock of shit. I'm sorry. That's a crock of shit. There is no cure for cancer. And reason number one is that cancer is not a singular disease. It is over 100 different diseases, different cell structures and different reactions to different
To
drugs.
each person, yeah.
And different people can have the same cancer, get the exact same treatment. One person can reach remission, the other can die. Because that's how complicated cancer is.
They don't do trial studies on every person. It's
right.
They try to get numbers that support a general direction of response.
And you play the percentages, of course, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work or not work with you. But that's the thing, is that you can't, you've got to stay in your lane and not bring those things up, because it's just kind of insulting when people essentially are accusing you of poisoning your wife. You should tell her not to do the chemotherapy. I'm sorry, it's the chemotherapy that's going to either save her or not save her. But without the chemotherapy, she's not going to survive.
So, moving on from the chemo and the opinionated, there's a term you use in your book, and I can't remember if it's the name of a chapter. Crappy to happy.
Oh.
Crappy to happy. I don't feel I'm a crappy to happy guy, but I am definitely a glass half full kind of person. I think my glass half full perception is what allowed me to carry some strength through my journey. Much like that poster right over there. That's
epic shit.
Yeah, do epic shit. And that's how I try to go through it, because I do feel like if I have a positive bounce in my step, that's going to propel me more forward than trying to create that momentum from scratch, I guess is a good way to describe that. So how can I, being a glass half full kind of person, be in someone's life and watch? I don't want to keep my attitude. I want to be who I am, but I need to be respectful of being able to read the room and understand how my attitude can maybe on the wrong day be off-putting, or what's a way I can come in and start to build that experience of having that half glass full mentality to a person or to a group of people that are someday want to take your glass and dump it on the ground.
We're all works in progress. 2 steps forward, a step back. Generally speaking, I think Shelly and I, more so Shelly than I, but I followed as close as possible, wanted to be positive about things. I don't mean to dismiss the importance of being positive. I'm just realistic that being positive didn't save my friend's life. It was the chemo or whatever. I don't know what drug regimen.
Whatever treatment.
The treatment saved her life. And if the treatment didn't work, positive attitude wasn't going to save her.
The aura didn't, yeah.
But the reality is that people with positive attitudes, looking at correlation, not causation, but correlation, is that people with positive attitudes tend to have better support systems. People with positive attitudes tend, and I'm talking in the cancer world here, tend to not miss their appointments with their oncologists or members of their oncology team. People with positive attitudes tend to follow directions with their drug usage. When I say drug I'm talking about cancer drugs.
Right.
You know, they don't take one and say, oh, that makes me feel like shit, so I'm going to stop taking it and not tell anybody. They tend to follow those things. So there is a correlation between having a good attitude and having a better outcome. I won't deny that at all.
Right.
What I'm saying is that these people were saying that attitude was what was going to cure you. And I don't need to be told that. So in terms of being able to offer a positive attitude, sometimes it's good to do that on days that they seem receptive to it. Sometimes it's good to let them feel safe enough to say in front of you without getting, quote unquote, judged about not having the right attitude of, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I'm having a bad day. And that's what it is. It's a bad day or it's a bad week.
Yeah.
We had those physically and we had those psychologically. And it's good when friends can read the room and to not, if you're having a bad day, then say to them, God, that sucks. As opposed to, but it's going to be okay, because that seems to take the wind out of the fear I'm seeing. And when I say take the wind out of it, I mean that in a negative way.
Yeah.
I need to express this right now. And part of maybe getting back into that good, positive thinking is to let me get the shit out first, and then I'll start thinking about it more positively again.
So if I hear you right, yeah, I think this, at least it's starting to make sense in my head, being a glass half full kind of guy and knowing if you're having a day, it doesn't even have to be a day, just knowing the scenario you're going through. Like the positive attitude people, the glass half full, you can almost come in and embrace that situation with them. Not that you have to fix it, not that you have to say it's going to be okay, but like walking is like, man, just this sucks.
Yeah.
And like, let me just hug you. Like, this sucks, and don't just, I'm going to hug you and scream it sucks if you need to with me. And it's going to be okay that we have, like, just talk about how bad this sucks. Just as much as okay it's to celebrate the bad day.
The first thing, the only thing, if you, and I mean you and I mean the impersonal you were to come in to my house when we're going through a bad time because we're having a setback with treatment and so forth, God, that sucks. The first thing I'm going to say to myself is, thank God this guy gets it.
Yeah, right? That makes all the sense in the world,
And
because
that makes me feel better.
Yeah, and the person with the glass half full can just help you acknowledge and get you across the bridge of like, here's where it's okay to feel.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be scared to say that that I mean, that's going to be one of my bigger takeaways from this episode, if not this season, is for those that want to be positive and that have a smile and want to always be a fix-it kind of person. The way you can do that is by just acknowledging the shitty situation they're with them.
Yes. And to act,
you don't have to do it walking away. Like I can't imagine how many times, especially like this was like the meal train we had here for the boys and I after Leslie passed away. I can't imagine how many people like walked away from putting the food in the cooler on the front porch thinking like, I can't, what they're going through. Like they just would tear their heart apart of going through that. Like you can tear that apart with us. Like, and that's where the community gets mixed there, gets tied together, where you have that bond. So yeah,
there were times we didn't have official meal trains, but Caring Bridge has this thing where you can schedule things and so forth. And we always said, look, if you bring a meal, great. If you want to sit down and have it with us, that'd be even better.
Yeah. we always tried to catch people when they were dropping off the dinner because we wanted to like thank them and say hi and like don't feel like you have to like run up real quick and hide it and run away. We're not contagious.
No, God, what a great way to put that. We're not contagious.
No, like the grief and the sad like is not something you're gonna pick up and walk away with. I talked about it with Bob, I think in the very first episode. We're not like that the cartoon character where we touch a memory and it turns blue in sadness forever. That's not the way it works.
This is your loss essentially was your problem, not your neighbor's problem. Shelly's diagnosis was our problem. It wasn't our neighbor's problem.
Yeah.
But just to have them let us know that they see us in pain and it makes them uncomfortable and they want to help by taking something else off of their plate so they can cope with this pain a little bit better with a little bit more focus.
Yeah.
It's the antithesis of the cancer ghosting, of the widow ghosting. I had and I'm not going to mention names, but I had somebody, a colleague who wrote a long letter after Shelly's completion of primary treatment. It was an email saying, I want you to know I'm leaving Westminster, but I wanted you to know how sorry I was, and I wish I would have said something, but I just didn't know what to say. And there was a part of me that felt empathy with that. Yeah, I get that you don't know what to say, but you know what? And I told her, if you would have said the wrong thing, the world wouldn't have come to an end. Because you would have been here saying the wrong thing, as opposed to not being anywhere near, not being able to non-verbally support us, not providing a metaphorical shoulder, not bringing by a meal. I want to keep giving kudos to my next door neighbor because our diagnosis took place in December. He wasn't calling me up, let us know if there's anything we can do to help. Just that every time it snowed, he came over with a snowblower and shoveled or blew the snow off of our driveway and off of the sidewalk area, because it took something off of my plate so I could spend more time making sure I stayed with Shelly and tending to her needs.
Yeah.
And that was so helpful.
Because we sometimes I think just as much as when I was going through my grief and you going through your caregiving, it's, even though it's a burden, it's almost easier to just go ahead and do something instead of asking for the help. Because you'll sit there and toss and turn and think about, who can I ask this time? I've already asked them before. When was the last time I asked someone for help? Am I just being lazy? I can do this myself. Like I run through a whole gamut of like follow-up questions of grilling myself. Do I have a right to ask for help?
And you really took this to a different level from what I did. I didn't worry about that. And I'm thinking maybe I should have now.
But I think that's the part where I was really hard on myself. That's the people pleaser in me. When someone went through something, I was always like, maybe it's the actions we show is what we expect in return. Is maybe like when someone went through a major surgery or lost someone in their family, like one of the things I always tried to do was drop off paper plates, paper towels, paper cups, and napkins in a paper bag so they didn't have to worry about dishes.
Fantastic. What a great idea.
Like for like a week, they could just, with the food I knew that was going to be coming, here's just a bunch of things you can just toss and not have to worry about like doing dishes 2 times a day and all of those things. And I would never call someone and ask, hey, how about I bring over these paper goods so you can do, like, I would just put them and drop them on the front door. So I just, I can't really remember where I was going with that, except for the fact I think, it's just,
it was bothering you because you wanted to spread it perhaps created joy for your friends to be able to come to your aid by taking something off of your plate.
Without having to ask for it.
Yeah.
Like it was just that little kiss, that's something that, made you enjoy the Christmas magic. You know, um, if it's anything from just filling up the stockings to wrapping some of those things, to just showing up with a meal, or I've talked about it before, there'd be times that parents, friends of the kids' parents would call and say, "Hey, let us come by and pick up, you know, one of the boys and take them out to the basketball game tonight or over to the football game so you can have a couple hours." Like those are the just do it moments, like are so great to have those people. And that's a good transition to kind of start getting into the wrap up mode of going back to your book of like words aren't enough, and like how we're sitting here like thanking people and talking about like all of the little things.
Oh, the last chapter.
Towards the last chapters in your book where
Yeah.
it talks about like just how hard it is to express your gratitude of the things people do in your journey. And like I've sat here, like I've taken the Klauses like to a concert every year. Necessarily, it's not a concert maybe they don't want to go to. It's a concert I do, but I treat them and they go with me. It's the Dave concert, or we'll have their family over for dinner, and it's not for the expectation they're going to continue to do this. But I just don't like. How many thank you notes can I write them? Like there's so much love and actions that will never do justice of like what those two did for my kids, what those two did for me, from just the random people in Morton that I just never knew. And I still to this day don't know because all they did was drop off a meal on a card. And how much you don't know how much of a community you're a part of until those people show up. And there's no words to describe these feelings and these emotions. So, other than talking about all of the sweet little things that happened to you, how the thank yous, the expressions of gratitudes, maybe even the expressions of people that did things and they turned around and said, I never expected this to kind of result in my interaction with Keith or having this conversation. Like what, as we're wrapping up in the thank yous and some of these quotes and books and some of those opinions and instructions we tried to avoid, we're sitting here part of the episode where it's kind of welcomed. What are those thank yous and those things that we can do?
I kind of did the same thing as you, especially when treatment was coming to a close. And I made this list. The list would be too long of everybody, but there were about a dozen people. I think I mentioned them in the book.
Yeah,
who just went so far above and beyond the call of duty. One I know I brought a bottle of nice bourbon. I tried to do little things like this, and I realized I can't possibly pay back what they did for us, and other than to tell them, you saved our lives in from your corner. You saved our lives for a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I quoted Randy Pausch, Professor Randy Pausch, in this, and he wrote a book called The Last Lecture. He died. He had terminal cancer. He discovered his cancer at stage 4, and so he was not going to survive, and he unfortunately didn't. But he did have the wherewithal to live his life as well as he could, for as long as he could after the diagnosis. And one of those things was he wrote a book called The Last Lecture. He was a professor. And in it, and he may have brought this term up in other venues too, but he brought up the term not paying it back but paying it forward.
Yeah.
And that is to be the people for some other poor soul who unfortunately has to go through what you're going through, what you've been through. And you have this sense of, hate to use this word for lack of a better one, but a sense of wisdom that your experience has taught you of what not to do and what to do. Paying it forward. My writing these books was one avenue of trying to pay it forward. I haven't sold many of these books. These are not New York Times bestseller books. I've given away more books than I have sold because I see people will post in Facebook, they just got a cancer diagnosis. So I DM them and say, what's your address? And I just send them a copy of the book. And you know, they're just grateful because they say, wow, we've gone through this, you know, chapter 1, we went through that exactly, what you've gone through. It's helpful to be able to use this. And I know I will always say words are never enough, but I'll also backtrack on that and say sometimes they are.
Yeah.
Dr. McCarrion, Shelly had an appointment, unfortunately, after COVID started, so I was not allowed to come with her.
Oh, the anxiety, I bet that.
Well, Shelly brought her iPhone, and Dr. McCarrion said, "Oh yeah, you want to FaceTime this? Let's just do that."
Yeah.
So I was there.
Right.
I wasn't there
Physically. But yeah.
But at the end of the appointment, Dr. McCarrion said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "No, but I have something I want to say." And I started from the top. We met you, we thought you were all business, and then realized real soon that you were not just all business, but you were very concerned with us. You went so far above and beyond the call of duty. You did things you didn't have to do, but you did everything. And the result was, I still have my wife with me. And I wouldn't have were it not for you. And I don't know how many people thank you for this, but I wanted to just tell you, thank you. COVID time, she had her mask on, but I could see little tears welling up. And she said, nobody ever says that to me. Thank you. So I don't want to just say words don't matter. They matter a lot. And when you speak from the heart and you use a tone that shows, you know, that level of gratitude. I mean, I'm grateful to this woman. I was lucky. I won the marriage lottery when I married Shelly. She married so far down with me. I married so high up with her. I don't know what I would do, what I would have done, you know, at this point. And so the person who was second most responsible for that, and that was Dr. McCarrion, I wanted to make sure she knew I was grateful. The person most responsible for that was Shelly.
Yeah.
She was the one who went through everything and took it and decided not to give up. And one thing that I'll just mention, I know that we've got to wrap things up.
No, it's all right.
That I have a chapter in there about survivor's guilt. And you don't have any idea how much survivor's guilt I have felt over the years with friends who lost loved ones to cancer.
Yeah.
Survivor's guilt sitting here with you. You know, Shelly's life is not as good as it was before, because of the permanence of cancer and the propensity that it may someday return. But I have her here, and I feel guilty that you don't have Leslie here. And I feel this profound sense of sorrow, because It was a situation nobody could control, and you all deserved so much better.
Yeah, and I know you talk about it in your book, and it wasn't God's plan to come in and teach us a lesson. Um, this could have been a lot worse for us. It could have been a lot different for Leslie, the way it might have gotten, of maybe her surviving, but of being in a vegetated state, and I think the feelings you have and other people have of that survivor's guilt is very real. It's very
Yeah.
honest. And I think being able to talk about that with the people you especially feel that well with, you highlighted in your book, just shows the fact that you're showing that you're in a place to be able to listen and communicate and share that space with, and that and just be there. And um, going back to like words and tones, I remember, I think I shared it one other time before. I remember when Leslie passed away. And I remember like a couple days after the fact, like texting and talking with the doctor in the ICU that week. But then I remember like leaving and speaking to like every nurse on the way, because it was actually on a shift change day. Like we'd had the same people that entire time until that day. And so as they were all leaving, we were too. And I just remember telling them how much I appreciate them, like running up the hill and carrying the flag and not giving up.
Yeah.
And I think that's, no matter how long the fight, no matter where your position is in the fight, it's nice to know that us that are in the front line of that fight, that there's someone behind us carrying that flag. That's just
Good way of putting
yeah, yeah. Oh, man, we covered a lot today. Been a really good conversation. Is there any part of your story we haven't gotten to share yet that you think is really important to share?
it. These are conversations that really can go into perpetuity, because new things constantly come up.
Yeah.
But this was pretty comprehensive. I appreciate you're giving me the opportunity. I do want to say that there is a sense of grief throughout. Shelly and I, especially on every December 6th, we go out to dinner. It's weird. It is really, really weird, because it's not something that we celebrate. Too terrible to celebrate. But it's too impactful to ignore. We have to do something. It's like, yeah, this was a really
To recognize it.
shitty day a year ago, and we survived it. And it's almost, occasionally this gets worded, usually it's implied now, but it's almost like we are memorializing the death of Shelly's pre-cancer self. Because she keeps saying, I just want one more day of having my pre-cancer body, because she's in constant discomfort. It just,
And that's a grieving process.
it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than my boys will probably say, I wish I could go back to having
One more day.
one more day with my mom, or just one more chance to have one more conversation with Leslie, or for anyone to have the moment that was, is people that go through divorce.
Yeah.
It's similar in that nature. That's in talking to several people that have considered coming on this show and talking about the grief divorce holds. Not necessarily what the situation was that happened to them, but the emotions that come along, like they feel like
It played a role.
when they said yes to getting married, it was only maybe going up to the altar once or wearing one ring or being with one person for the rest of their life, and realizing that all of that is setting to something else they never imagined
Yeah.
in part of their story. I think that's where grief is so different, but there's still parallels to help us understand that, like, it's not a competition of who went through the worst thing. Fraternity brother, alum Nick Bartley, I talk about it a lot. He always shares about how we all are carrying our own plate of shit.
Yes.
And what we need to remind ourselves is to recognize other people's plates. It's not always about the plate we're carrying.
Just because somebody's plate is heavier than another person's doesn't mean that other person's plate isn't pretty damn heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But see, what you're doing with this is you're paying it forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think today's conversation is a whole new pay it forward way. We were able to help with people, share some conversation, and hopefully spur some other conversations and assistance for those that are needing it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to make the haul up here today and coming here today. This was such full circle moment of just being able to hold a conversation in such a important manner with someone who you didn't teach me how to talk, but you taught me the importance of people have always complimented me on the words and the tone and the way I approach conversations. And that is 100% the classes I took from you at Westminster. So I know there's a lot of other students out there that got the same experience, and we're all really lucky students to have that with you. And for anyone that's appreciated this podcast, this guy right here made me understand the tool and the muscle that this was. So I appreciate you very much, sir. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. And let me say that, Tom, with me or without me, you're going to be great.
I appreciate it's the experiences we go through that help us get to where we are today. So I wouldn't change any of them. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for what I believe is going to maybe be our second to last episode. I got some cool ideas in the hopper here for episode 10, or what might end up being in season 3, or maybe episode 11 or 12. Who knows? I guess you'll have to come back in a couple weeks and find out. So remember, no matter what journey you're going through, what experience you have just had, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a struggle, and it's okay that it's going to be tough. And it's okay to admit that it's going to be tough. You got this. I got this. We all are going to get this. I'm Tom Van Ness, your host, your guide of Guide Through Grief. We'll see you next time right here on Guide Through Grief. Thanks for coming by. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope today's episode will help guide you forward. My goal for this podcast has always been to create a safe place for people who are navigating their grief journey to lean on one another and share their own experiences. I ask that you share, subscribe, like, and comment so we know how to best support you. Finally, we rely on listeners like you to help keep this journey going. Guide Through Grief is dependent on the support and contributions from you. Please consider supporting the show and our cause. Visit our social media pages or click the link in our description for more information. Thank you.